what even is agentic AI? One person who did tell me they thought that software as we know it is dead is the so called father of entrepreneurship, Steve Blank, who I met this week. And so we're going to get into all of that today on today's episode of The Grounding. Hi, everyone. Hi, Ollie.
Great to be with you, Becky. I'm so jealous you actually got to meet Steve as well, by the way. That's epic.
I've had such a weird thing when I tell people because I feel like those who know know. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's so exciting. And I didn't just get to meet him. I literally am teaching on the same program, the same entrepreneurship program as him. And I was like, yeah, this is
pinch me moment.
Goals. So yeah, we can talk a little bit more about that later. There were definitely things that I sort of validated, I guess, about what I assumed he'd be about and what I think I understand from what he does. And then there were aspects which, new things to learn always, right?
So of course, we're always learning as entrepreneurs, I think.
That's
key thing. If you think you've completed it, then you definitely haven't.
Absolutely. And how are you this week?
I'm great. Yeah, I mean, the sun's been out in Bristol. It's been absolutely amazing. Feels like spring has sprung and we are ready for some warmer weather, which is great.
Oh, I got told by the hospital once that if you walk around with your forearms out, then this is enough vitamin D to be healthy and keep your energy levels up. So I have my forearms out today. I've got the rest of it still a bit cozy, but
just wondering how long I take vitamin D spray for now. Maybe I can ease back on it.
Yeah, exactly. Because, well, I don't know. I a week of sunshine in March doesn't necessarily mean that we're ready for
the shorts on. Yeah, don't worry.
No. Yeah, good. So I really wanted to bring up this conversation about SaaS, just because I felt like I've heard this and seen this everywhere in the last couple of weeks. Just keep hearing SaaS is dead. Everything's about agents. So should we chat about that?
I think it's quite interesting, isn't it? It's like, I can't remember the theory, but like if you spot a yellow car and then you can't see more yellow cars, is it an element of that, or is it more that somebody's jumping on a trend and then other people are just following and adding to the noise?
Yeah. One thing I realized is that in this world of kind of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, media, there's so many different stakeholders, so many different players in this. And a lot of this noise, what we're hearing is from the point of view of investment, or external stakeholders who might be thinking about these things versus looking at it from a point of view of maybe an entrepreneur and that more day-to-day point of view of what is actually going on. And so that's why I thought it would be really interesting to talk about it here as well, because we're about grounding things, right? It's not just about are these smart investment plays, which I think we already touched on this a little bit a few weeks ago, whereas do you still, how do investors see agents? How do they see software? Is it a good investment for things? But also as an entrepreneur, well, what if you already have a software business? What if you're using various different software tools? Should you be using something different? But also if you're thinking of doing new things, how does that work and what are you thinking of doing? So just thought we could have a little bit of a chat about it. But you are right. Again, it depends on the bubbles you're in, I think. And it's definitely, I don't know why people are suddenly, I think there's this sense of we're entering a new paradigm. This is the beginning of a new 20-year cycle and it looks very different. I'm sure that these things are going to look different within 5 years as well and 10 years. But it does feel like a new era.
Yeah, I think some of it is obviously hype and noise. And it's coming from people who've got a vested interest in hyping it up. But I have to say, the last couple of weeks, I've just been experimenting with Claude Code and co-work, and it's quite addictive.
Yeah.
Just in terms of what you can do now, it's pretty incredible. And it has, if I'm being honest, it has genuinely blown my mind.
Yeah. Well, I've been looking into it more at a kind of thought leadership and communication level, I've just been like, oh, I'm too busy to sit and play with this, but I cannot wait to get my hands on it for specific purposes. And I think I just wanted to, before we dive into that, touch on one of the reasons that there is this talk around software is because software valuations have gone down
Yeah.
a lot. And since there was a peak in 2021, there's been just this massive, massive dip now. And so, and that I think is inevitable. Like there's ebbs and flows, and our job as entrepreneurs, I guess, is to make sure that we're aware of that, but that we're then like, okay, well, let's turn our faces to the future and what tools are out there and how can we use them. So how have you been using, like, what have you been playing with?
So specifically,
Yeah.
I've been messing about with Cowork,
Mhm.
and yeah, I've just been thinking about things that can be automated, and I think that is where the gold dust lies. I think there's a lot of talk about agentic and agents and stuff. So I think
Mhm.
maybe before we dive into the
Yeah.
conversation, what's your perception of what
Yeah.
agents or agentic AI actually is?
It's about setting off an AI system
Mhm.
in order to achieve certain outcomes. So looking at those outcomes that you want, and then instead of it just being one single action or one single thing that you want to find out from it, it's about trying to complete a series of tasks that allow for those specific outcomes. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that it can be articulated way better than
I
that.
mean, that's a really good definition. And I think just to build on that, the way that I like to think about it as well is typically your big LLMs that you're using for more kind of question and answer, that ping pong back and forth between you and a chatbot.
Yeah.
Now it's, as you say, it's around a process and an actual goal. So using agentic AI is about, right, I've got this goal and how can I use it to make that a reality and a result?
Yeah.
So you're setting a clear goal objective, you're giving it the context, which is really important as well, and then also then hitting play on that, and then just watching the results come in, which is kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah. What I like about it is I think this is something that you can play with on a case by case basis as well. So stick to the stuff where it's safe, where you're not, where there's not a lot of risk in terms of maybe sharing things you don't want to share, or having outcomes, setting it off on a task that has major consequences in some way. Like you can play with it in a really small way, or with things that are fun and playful is kind of the word there.
Yeah, and I think that's in our nature as entrepreneurs, isn't it, to experiment and play.
Yeah.
So yeah, go out, have a play. It is quite, yeah, as I say, I've spent the last couple of evenings just messing around with it, but it quickly, like 45 minutes, then disappears into 3 hours, and I'm like, oh god, it's time for bed.
But I also like that, though. I mean, of course, we have to always be conscious of the time we're spending on things, but how awesome to like get into that flow with something and have fun actually playing with something. So what kind of applications are you playing with?
Yeah, one of the things that I've always kind of thought is we've got all of this content in terms of Founded and Grounded, 6 years, coming up to 100 episodes, a lot of content. And we've used various bits of software to help us with that. So there's 2 different tools that we've used, bits of software, and they kind of there's obviously naturally some overlap between them, but then there's also one that's good for one thing, one that's good for another. So like I've still kept both in play.
Yeah.
But what is really frustrating is having all of that in isolation. So one very simple task that I did was get all of our episodes transcripts, get them into a Notion table. So obviously I used Cowork to be able to do that, and then also pulled out the bits from the 2 bits of software in a browser using an MCP to then basically put all of that information into one Notion database, the Founded and Grounded oracle of everything. And it's just having all of that stuff in one place means that I can now actually build up more of a content plan, and be more strategic in terms of what bits we're sharing. Because I find that, as a creator, we're often told that for every bit of content, you should be doing 5 bits of marketing, and life.
Yeah.
Running a business, everything just gets in the way, right?
Exactly. I mean, before we came on, I said to you, I'm going to make sure I share the link to this live. And then I was like, nobody's going to see it because I haven't even been doing anything on, if you're not active, then you're not building that engagement. And so often I'm like, things happen and we do things. And of course, this being one of them, you're creating that content, and then where is it going? What's happening? And you have all this good intention. And I really like the idea of having something or a system, a process that
Yeah.
enables you to just stay disciplined, stay up to date, and
I think it's also just not being overwhelmed by it. Like
yeah,
the amount of
i-
content that we
yeah,
have, just actually knowing that there's an operating system there and everything is going to be scheduled. It's going
mm-hmm,
to be done based on, different awareness stages. So
yeah,
if it's going for top of funnel, more awareness, or is it consideration, or more bottom of funnel, you're going for
mm-hmm,
conversion. So making sure there's a good split between all of them. And then making sure that each one is going against your content pillars, the things that you want to be known for.
yeah.
Because I find that I like to know about lots of different things, and that's one
I
thing I
know
struggle with.
that's my
And like trying
issue.
to connect loads of different ideas, but sometimes actually having a bit more focus in terms of a
Yeah.
strategy, I think is a good thing.
Well, and this is the thing of being left to your own devices, right? Is when I'm certainly the same, where it's like, but there's this thing I want to do, this and this and this, and every now and again I pull it all together and come up with some amazing, like, oh no, it's this. This is like whatever. This is the thing in the middle that pulls everything together, and it all makes perfect sense. And all I need to do is focus on one particular area because it pulls everything else together, and then over time that just unravels and it becomes overwhelming again. And so that idea of having something that can help you with that and keep you on course, keep you
Mm,
on track, and with as entrepreneurs, I always used to think I was quite a focused person, but I'm certainly like self-motivated and disciplined. But if you
yeah.
do a lot of different things, you're constantly getting pulled in lots of different directions. And yeah, to have something keep you on track, I think is really cool.
Yeah, I think it's that keeping on track and on strategy,
Hmm.
and not being overwhelmed. Those are kind of three core things for me. And then I think the important thing to do if like you are experimenting is though it does need that context. So we're lucky in the sense that we've got a lot of data, a lot of transcripts, a lot
Yeah.
of information points that will allow an LLM to build up a picture about who you are, what you care about, how you talk, what you think, what your aspirations are, what you're afraid of. Um, and giving it a lot of information means that actually the result when you're setting that goal is a lot better.
Mm.
But also it's revealed things that I kind of maybe wasn't 100% aware of.
Oh yeah.
So I think it's good for that awareness piece or solidifying things that
What
you
type
think
of
you're gonna.
things do you want to
Um,
say?
I think it's just like, and it probably goes a bit back to why we're doing the grounding. I think a lot of founded and grounders been kind of hiding behind other entrepreneurs,
Hmm.
and we're kind of not really at the front and center of that. And we obviously do our analysis bit when we dissect the conversations with founders, but actually having that confidence today, like I've interviewed 150 plus founders, consulted with 500 plus, like I know founders inside out,
Yeah.
and that my opinion is valid,
Hmm.
and I get good feedback on that from founders, and it's just that piece of going, actually,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't need to be hiding in the shadows.
I love that. Oh,
Yeah.
there we go. Although I would say for some people they don't need that self-aggrandizement for from AI. However, it's absolutely true. Yeah, you know it. You've been out there and you've been like, yeah, come into the spotlight.
There we go. But
Yeah.
also doing the confidence to do things like doing lives and putting ourselves out there more
Yeah.
and being consistent, and we're starting to see the rewards of that, I think. And that's the point. I think that sometimes as an entrepreneur, like you've got certain goals and priorities, and often if you can't count them on one hand, then obviously there's too many there. But sometimes you just feel a bit of a roadblock, or you just haven't got the motivation or energy to do that. And I think using agentic AI just means that you can still chip away at things
Mm.
and progress, and then feel like you're still closer to achieving those goals.
Yeah, it's something I've always felt when I've had a team, and so I mean, and I know again, there's two sides of a coin in terms of AI and thinking about people and teams, and of course there's potential. Well, no, not potential. There are issues there in terms of
Yeah,
jobs.
job redundancies.
Yeah. However, in positions at the moment, we work on our own a lot of the time, and so having that feeling of having a team or having something that at least, it doesn't go as far, I don't think, as having a team, but but from a functional perspective, it can get things done.
It's getting stuff done whilst you sleep, which is the craziness of
and
it.
keeping that on track. And I think that was because when I was running my last team, you're like, well, you've agreed these things together already. You've agreed these goals. You've agreed these intentions, these activities. They're all happening, and they're going to continue to move towards happening.
Yeah.
Even if you have days when you ebb and flow. And this sounds, what you just described sounds very similar to me to that. So yeah, I'll definitely be on it, I think, certainly on the content side of things, because again, to me, content just feels like such a safe use case. Or and I know there's several different, or probably thousands, millions of use cases even in the content sector, but it's in the sense of these are things that you're going to be saying publicly anyway, or you've already said publicly, or so to me it doesn't feel as risky from that perspective.
It's not fabricating anything, hallucinating. It's going off what you've actually said, which is important. I think another key use case for me was kind of thinking about pipeline and sales and who to target. Because I think, we're very clear on who our target audience is and know our ICP inside out. But often you get sidetracked by going after new prospects. And, the easiest way to sell things is to sell to people that you already know. It's not breaking news right here. But I think it does get disregarded by founders sometimes. So just very simple activity of like, we use something called Shield to look at all of our LinkedIn data over the, I think, 15 years that I've been using it. Some of it's not so relevant, but uploading that and then also looking at outreach in terms of messages, who have I been having two-way conversations with, so ignore and you can set stipulations and guardrails, so ignore all conversations where it's one way to me or me one way to somebody else, like there's no traction or interest there, so it's only going based off two-way dialogues. And then you can start looking at scraping your posts and saying, well, who's engaging, who's commenting, who's liking, and then you can build up a clear intent of who is maybe likely to want your service or product, depending on what you're selling. So doing that has been, and it came up with like 793 prospects, and it put them in weightings of who's hot, who's less so, who's more kind of further away. But I think as well as founders, we forget that only 2 to 3% of your pipeline are ready to buy from you right now, and the rest of them, 25% are probably going to be nurturing over the next 6 months. Another 25% will buy at some point in the future, and then 50% are, less than 47% or whatever the numbers are. They're not going to buy from you ever, and just don't worry about that.
No, that's okay. Exactly. You're making me think about the founders who do get very overwhelmed by that sales piece, and especially new people or people they haven't engaged with quite so much. And again, what I like about this is you can set up everything up on a good day, or on a day where you feel kind of even removed from that. You're like, well, what's the intent? What's the goal? And then you get it moving. And so when you have those moments where you're a bit more timid or tired or whatever it is that then makes you question some of it, that process is still rolling, and you're still moving forwards. And I think there's something quite confidence building about that.
I think there is. And one thing I would say is, like, it's also good for honing your thinking, because you have to be clear on what actually is the goal. And you can do like user ask question. So it'll then, if you're trying to, maybe you're a bit fuzzy on a particular goal, and if you set up that prompt, then it will come back with questions to help you really define what the actual goal is. And that's a really valuable, it's like your thinking partner, like a thing that you can bounce back and forth with as well. But then now with the agentic aspect, it's then actually go and do some of that for me.
I am excited to jump into this. And one of the things I was finding with just LLMs, chatbots, it's very linear in its thinking. And it really was like, that's why it exhausts me so much. I realized that it was very just, you start going backwards and forwards on one thing, and then it goes down one track, and you're like, you've exhausted me. And I like, where even are we right now?
Further,
this isn't expansive in any way whatsoever. Whereas with agentic AI, we're talking much more practicality and getting things done and working towards outcomes. And like you said, I think that setup, and it's so funny because I just keep thinking back to things in my business. And I really liked working with people on the outside and bringing experts in because they would always do the thing you just described, which is really help you to set that intent, get clear on the goals, be that thought partner, see what the scope is. Are you being realistic? Like all of those kind of things, which are incredibly helpful. And when you're in your own space, I mean, we can sit and say, sure, we'll find time to sit down and do that and really get clear on it. But it's much harder to do it if you haven't got the purpose, or if you don't think you've got the tools to deliver something or the resource to deliver something anyway. So
or the confidence.
You're right. So it's kind of opening those doors. One of the things that I'm thinking about here is keeping the human in the loop, because I think that's one of the important principles when it comes to anything AI. So of course, we're talking about putting the human in the loop in terms of inputting, in terms of goal setting. Have you played with how you're making sure that you keep the human in the loop as you go through the process?
Yeah. So say, for example, you've set an activity and, you're not going to be doing it over one batch. So we recommend, say, right, you want to do this, I'd recommend doing it in batches of 20 over 2 days or whatever. And you can put the stipulation in there whether you wanted to check in between batches to check the result, or you say, actually, no, go ahead and execute on that. So you can set those rules and guardrails in terms of the kind of the prompt that you're putting in to ensure that it's not going to do something damaging. And I've heard weird and wonderful things about people like sending messages to people in WhatsApp groups and or just really weird things. They're like, are you okay? Like what's going on with you right now? That doesn't, but it's an agent gone rogue, essentially. So, I mean, the worst bit is either like cyber privacy, IP going out the window. It could be, but also your reputation. So I think that's why you've got to be so careful.
I think definitely making sure that you see everything before, if you are using it to at least draft messages, maybe draft responses. That's one thing I've heard on LinkedIn, is finding others who are in a similar area to you and then suggesting who you should be commenting on and connecting with by that way, and the types of comment you could put onto it, but not doing it and then not allowing it to do it and getting it to that point, and then you are the one that drafts it or signs it off.
And you can put those stipulations like draft everything, but I want final eyes on it before you hit go.
I mean, it's just so natural in terms of how you would work with a team. And I'm kind of, part of me is thinking, what am I missing here? And what I'm thinking is, doesn't it just show that it's even more important for people to understand how to lead, how to manage, and that's not, I don't want to anthropomorphize the AI, because we know that's not good, but actually in this particular case, I guess it's more about kind of managing projects, managing systems, managing processes. Like having those kind of skills are still important here.
They are. And I think coming back to the original point about, SaaS and the software dead, like it's definitely not dead. I mean, the SaaS founders were seen as the sexy kind of founders in the startup ecosystem. Right? And I think now that is changing more into AI and agentic AI in particular. But the point is, I think that we're seeing a consolidation of people using multiple different bits of software. And now using agents to connect things better and reduce, the number of tools that they're actually using. Because you can build a bespoke solution. Whereas previously you might be using some like automation software like N8N or Zapier to try and connect things. Now you don't even need to do that.
I was thinking about Zapier, we'll see. It's those kind of tools.
And to caveat that, I'm not a techie, so might be getting some hate right now saying no, you do need it still, but I don't.
Well, I think again, it's going to be different people, different scenarios need different things. But one of the things I was thinking about with this was about kind of, that time. It's so random. Sorry.
Go on, no, I love random.
That kind of analogy you have where it's about productivity and tasks, and you talk about like putting in a jug. You put your big stones and then your smaller stones and everything else. And I almost think of this like that, where it's like, well, actually, you're probably still going to need those big stones, like the big incumbent software. That's not really going anywhere anytime soon. Especially with the way corporations work, bigger businesses work. Like the universities I work for suddenly going to turn around and be like, we're not using Office 365. Like the load to transition from things like that. And I mean, you still need, well, debatable. I'm sure there's different options, but you still need emails. You still need cloud, file storage. You still need all of these things. So I think of them as like the big bricks. And then the beauty of agentic AI is it becomes the sand or even the water maybe that goes between everything else, and it fills up that jug. And you can decide what that is for you, depending on who your organization is or who you are as an individual. It can be highly tailored to your needs, which we all know, like any software we use, there's always a frustration, right? Because it always doesn't quite fit our use case the way we want it to.
And I think a lot of tools have gone down the route of trying to bake in AI to the product, and not for no really real reason or purpose or use case. And I think they're just adding it on. Then you've seen like the blurring of lots of different software and going, actually, these two products, like they look pretty similar. I mean, a good, to use a practical example, like one way when it did pan out, where I didn't have crossover, we were using for remote interviews, we were using Squadcast. And I can't remember which way around it was, whether they bought Descript or Descript brought them. That's an editing bit of software. And that actually meant I was paying for 2 bits of software, and it was then rolled into one. I was like, amazing, happy days.
Yeah, exactly. You can consolidate.
But I think there will be a lot of M&A and acquisition in the sector as well, and that's more likely to happen.
Yeah, I'm still very interested to see how, people who are out there now, because what I'm seeing in the space is there are these agentic businesses starting where some kind of tool is at the core of their offering, and it remains to be seen kind of how resilient those kind of tools are going to be. I think one thing I've heard is that there's been a shift in wording. So we've always had software as a service, and now we're having service as software. So this idea of still SaaS, but it means something different. And so
SaaS V2.
Yeah, exactly. And so then the question is, it still comes back to, who is your market? Who are you serving? Do they actually need this? Because how many people are really going out there and building their own agents? How many people? It's still going to be a small proportion of people, right?
But that's the really interesting thing, Becky. I think there's so many business owners who may be coming towards retirement and they've got no succession plan. They're not going to pass on their business to anyone. There's going to be so much optimization. The fact I've just done it for Founded and Grounded in a couple of weeks, I'm like, wow, that's transformational. I'm just going, how many business owners aren't looking at this?
Yeah.
And could you start acquiring some businesses that when they want a key clean slate, they want to retire, they don't want it anymore. And then actually, how could you take that from, a £1 million business to a £4 million business, or whatever the figures are?
Yeah. The idea you've got people who've spent their whole career building up very trusted customer bases, and they are serving them in a specific way to deliver specific outcomes. And then how do we shift on that? Yeah, that's one thing that comes into my head is, I don't know why this just flew into my head, but like there is a question of like optimization for what? And I think that all of this reckoning also requires us all to continue to go back to ourselves and go, what's the goal? What is it we're trying to achieve? And I think it's very obvious in certain cases, in most cases, probably for individuals, but I guess that comes back to that intent piece of, okay, what do you need? How are you going to get it? What's the best way of doing that? Because also for some people to sit down and play with agentic AI and try and figure it out over weeks or months and make some mistakes and risk reputation and everything else is not going to be what they
No,
want to
and
do.
some people aren't tech savvy, so they're not even
Yeah.
gonna enter that conversation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're right though. Like you're not just optimizing for the sake of optimizing. Like there's got to be a key KPI, a key business result or outcome that you want to achieve.
Yeah.
And I think now that we're living in the world of generalists, and I'm definitely a generalist. I'm not a specialist in many areas at all. But I think that because I've got that kind of cross-sector view of different business functions, I think it is giving me more of a superpower than I previously had.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes back to a point that you were just making before we came on the call as well, which is it's about enhancing all aspects of you. So one thing I know about myself, I'm pretty confident in is when I show up, I deliver, I can do what I do, the human connection is good, I can draw things out of other humans, etc. But if people don't know that, then you're not going to have as many opportunities to do that, and that goes for kind of any expertise that people have, and so we're coming back to content again, but that's a good example of, well, at the end of the day, you need to be a signal in the noise in order for people to be attracted towards you, to be able to want to work with you, to be and if that's and that takes time to, just the resource of kind of doing content and everything required there and staying on top of it and staying focused on it. And if you've got something to help you stay on track, then that's going to help you continue to be known amongst your network, hopefully raise your profile as well.
I think what you're saying is as well that you still need those human skills, and then now more critical than ever, right? Because I was at a networking event recently and they were talking about, we're not about this bloody, AI bollocks, like, excuse my language, but we're people, we build relationships, and there's so much truth in that. But it doesn't mean to say that you can't do the other bit as well. And with the really strong human relationships, that you can actually build a better business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've just spent 3 days in a room with a bunch of entrepreneurs and mentors and leading some sessions, listening in on other sessions. And even as I'm remembering now, the laptops weren't out, there were exercises, there was engagement, and this is really allowing founders to step back and get clear on what they're doing, why they're doing it. But more importantly, the connection between each other and the difference I feel. I mean, it's Friday now, and it's the end of a week, it's the end of a busy week. And I kind of came into this morning feeling like, feel really grounded, which is good because we're doing the grounding. And I feel kind of motivated and I feel like the work was all good and that's fine. But it was a sense of, oh, I really built a rapport with people over that period of time. And the energy of that is so much more powerful than even just, oh, I ticked everything off my list this week because AI helped me to do it.
Yeah. If you're building those in-person relationships in particular, I mean, virtual is a second alternative, but I think if you're there in a room with people, you can feel the energy and you can build the energy when you have that two-way conversation, or you're speaking with multiple people, like you can get energy from it. I mean, you can come away from, like, as you said, 3 days feeling quite exhausted, but that doesn't mean that you didn't get loads of energy from it, and you'll go into next week going, wow, what a week that was last week.
And there's 2 types of exhausted, aren't there? There's well, that sense,
out kind of exhausted.
Yeah, exactly. Which isn't. I don't feel like that at all. I felt like I was potentially headed that way, and I've had a busy week, and I'm not feeling that way. You're like, okay, this was good. So, I think it's about, and I really do think this is what the future looks like, which is really working on those human skills, those human connections. We are all still humans and we're living human lives, and we want those lives to be fulfilling and connected. And so does this technology then allow us to do that even more? And I guess that would be a good outcome. to be able to use technology to mean that we do actually have more time. And I know this is me like living in that really kind of picture perfect version of this AI enhanced world. But why not be optimistic about where we're going? We can look at the risks, but let's also be optimistic and say, actually, we've been thinking a lot about what happens when AI comes and takes over, and tech bros like take all the wealth and all of these kind of things, and these apocalyptic futures. But actually, doesn't have to be an apocalyptic future, and let's make sure it's not, because there is a gray area. We can utilize the tools, we can engage with technology, and we can live better human lives because of that.
Yeah, it does feel like quite a point in history, I think, that we've always had technological innovation, right? But I think the speed of it at the moment is pretty crazy. But like you're saying, like you can either get on board with it and utilize it to your advantage to be able to free up time to do something else, or you can disregard it and not engage with it, and that's equally valid. And it's not saying that your business isn't going to grow, because it depends on your type of business, right?
I literally had an investor say to me this week, I won't say what type of business it was, because it might give it away, but they said, oh yeah, we've just been looking at a business, I think we're going to invest in them. They still use paper and pens for everything. And because it was a very specific use case again, and why not? If it's serving its community, if that's interesting to those investors and it can give them a return, and that growth prospect seems like it's there, then
if you're adding value and you can extract that value, then it's still going to be a business, right? And I think that's the point.
The thing for me, you've mentioned the word guardrails a lot. I've talked about the human in the loop. I think the important thing is having the conversations and knowing, instead of just maybe running and getting so overexcited and doing things without any guardrails, just having the conversations and having more awareness about what implications might be, and knowing that as you step into things. I think that's the important thing, really.
Definitely is. Anyway, let's go back to Steve Blank. I want to hear more about what Steve said and any insights that you had from him. Maybe set the scene for how it all came about.
So Steve Blank, serial entrepreneur, been in Silicon Valley for decades, wrote a book called The Startup Owner's Manual, which for me is the Bible of entrepreneurship. And the premise behind it is this, what's called the customer development process. But it's about, it's essentially setting up everything in your business as an assumption to start with. And then what you're doing is you're trying to test those assumptions as quickly as possible, prior to then being able to sort of lock in on certain things and then expand your business out. The reason it's called customer development is because the idea is to get close to the customers as soon as possible.
I mean, I've seen this so many times when founders are trying to sharpen the saw in their head.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're not getting any feedback from the market. And it's exhausting doing it in your head, because like you go around in circles and like, oh no, this is the new value proposition.
Yeah.
And then 2 days later, you're like, no, actually, it's this.
Do you know what's even more exhausting? Mentoring companies like that, or coaching companies like that. And you're like, well, what do the customers say? Oh, well, in a few weeks' time, there might be an opportunity to go and talk. No, you need to like be out there with the customers now. They will give you the answers that you need. And I think the thing that holds people back sometimes, especially in some of the spaces that I work in. So if you're talking like B2B, if you're talking deep tech, there's often a sense of, is there only one chance?
There's one chance.
There's only so many potential businesses customers we could sell to. And that's what people worry
First
about.
Impressions,
But one of the things I really liked, and I guess is one of the things that was validated for me this week, was Steve Blank has worked in a lot of those sectors, and still he goes through that process. And I wanted to mention just this idea of customer development. The notion is this: you start talking to people sooner rather than later. you don't pitch to them, you
No.
get curious
Yeah,
with
yeah,
them.
yeah.
And what that does is enable you to build a relationship with them. They start to feel like they're part of your journey. They're almost co-creating with you. They might actually be
Yeah, it might be,
co-creating with
yeah.
you
And they'll
as
be
you
a
go
customer.
along. They might be a customer. They might be an initial pilot, but as you're doing that pilot, you're able to talk to them about, is this going to be viable as a more scalable proposition, or is this something that, okay, you got some budget in your little department for it, but how do we actually make
Yeah.
this something that the whole organization can use?
Yeah.
And how do we get onto procurement lists? How do we, like, all of those kind of nuanced details that are actually so important for
Yeah.
taking a business from being that kind of, oh yeah, this is a nice idea, we've managed to show it in pilots, to actually having big impact and getting used across an organization. And so I mean, for me, this goes back a long way to when I was first doing my startup. And I can just remember when I was introduced to this concept, it changed everything for me. Partly, I think, because I have a scientific background, I have quite a scientific mind. So the idea of setting a hypothesis and then testing a hypothesis suddenly became, it's almost like the agentic thing we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's no longer about kind of judging yourself or like having to be super brave and super confident to do things. You go, well, this is what the experiment is. So like objectively, I just have to do the experiment,
to get the
which
answer I
involves
want.
talking to a bunch of people,
Yeah.
So like there was a shift in mindset that allowed me to be braver. And I can remember buying the book and actually like creating a business model canvas on my floor. I was in Finland at the time as well. I had this apartment I was living in Finland, and I had these massive A3 pieces of paper and using Post-its to stick my hypotheses all over the place. And yeah, it's just such a memory of those early days.
I love building like that, because that's like, it's tangible, you can remember it.
Yeah.
You can remember where you were, the moment, moving those bits of paper around, planning out this hypothesis. And it's it's obviously, it sticks with you though, doesn't it?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, like the whole thing about that customer development is so pivotal. And it's like other books as well, like the mum test, and like actually going out to your customers. I think, a lot of people, if I had to boil it down to why people skip over that, I think if I just had to get it down to one thing that it probably stems from, I think it is the concept of people wanting perfection.
Yes. Yeah, that's, do you think that's the idea of like, you can't be perfect until you speak to
No, I meant in
others,
terms of like that they want to do they want to line up all their ducks in a row.
Oh, yeah.
Everything before we go out to the market.
And people are going to
and
make a mess
launch
of
it.
that. Yeah. I think you're right. And that, I guess those two things come together, that idea of like, I'm too scared to talk to anyone, or it needs to be perfect before I talk to anyone. It needs to be perfect before I launch something.
You don't want people to poo-poo your idea as well.
No, exactly.
But it would just make it better.
This is why process is so important though, because you need to know what the feedback is feeding into.
Yeah.
And it needs to kind of have that purpose. It needs to move things forward. I was working with a company the other day, and they said, we've got some projects going on at the moment. And again, this is something I see a lot with some of the entrepreneurs I work with. They may have been quite project focused in the past. And so a shift from being all about managing projects and kind of task and finished type things into evolving into a commercial business is, that's a pretty common path. And I think that this process helps with that too, because for many of them, a project will be about probably product or technical development or testing that product in the hands of users. The parts they'll be forgetting is around the viability part of the business. So if we talk about desirability, feasibility, and viability, a lot of people focus on that desirability bit. Like, do our users want this? That honestly doesn't matter as much as
features and benefits.
Yeah, exactly. People love the features side of it. They feel more comfortable with that. Oh, we're going to add this, we're going to add that. And then, but if you actually focus more on what is the customer need, and importantly, who is the customer, not just the end user,
and who's going to pay for
and
it,
who's paying for it, and what do they need, and what problem are you solving for them? And then you need to get into that viability piece around, is like, what are they willing to pay for it? What are the processes you need to go through to get to that point? those things are really hard to hear. And I think that's the other reason that people don't like to do it, because it can feel really scary and it can be quite off-putting. And that's the most important things. And that can, if you know those things, you can leapfrog so much else, because all you're doing by ignoring it is just delaying the inevitable. So you're going to continue to invest more of your time, more of your energy, maybe more of somebody else's money into something that is possibly going to fail because you haven't done that work in the beginning. But I think that is one of the reasons it's hard for people to do it that way.
And I think there's also like that often our downfall, like the British nature in people of like not actually asking for the money. If you don't actually ask for it, you're not going to make the sale. This
was one of Steve's stories, and I've been focusing a lot on this idea of culturally, what is it, what are we good at, because one of the cohorts I'm working with at the moment, the one I'm teaching on here, they're an international cohort, so US, Canada, the UK, other European nations are represented, and so that cultural thing has come up a lot, and differently with the different nations. But I do think it was one of the things I said to Steve actually was like, I guess we've just, with the startups I work with, I feel like sometimes they just need to be bold. And he was like, that's something I hear British people say a lot. And I was like, how interesting. But then I said, do you think that's because, we need to sort of hype ourselves up to be courageous in that way, to be a bit more direct, and then he said, well, actually, no, like the majority of humans are not going to like doing these things, whether you're American, whether you're British, whatever else. But I think that there is a bit of that in, he told a story around pricing as well, which I thought was great. And he made it sound so easy. And I'm sure, I know it's not quite so easy in
what was about
everyday life
pricing, or
he actually said both, because again, if you go with that curiosity hat, so one thing he said is he went in and he said, oh yeah, it's going to be $1 million per whatever annual fee, and they were like, and then he was like, okay, hang on a second, so maybe I can do it differently, but just tell me, like, how many seats do you think you would actually need every year? And then they told him, oh, well, we would probably do about 10,000. And so all of a sudden he's got that piece of information. And then he's going, okay, well, if we did 10,000 a year, what if I charged, less for that? And so you're just getting into a conversation. And as you're going through that, the real question is, what have you learned? And I think if we see success as what important information have we learned that's going to serve our business and help us be clear about our strategy, that's a much better success metric than pretty much anything else for an early stage business founder.
And it's having that right information. Like if you're developing a proposal blind, like if you're just firing something off, then but if you're having these conversations, asking the right questions, understanding their point of view, where they're coming from, then obviously your proposal or pitch or whatever you're doing is gonna be better, and you're more likely to make the sale.
I think this is also a reason to go in kind of sooner rather than later, because if you go in at like, look, I've been hearing that a lot of people like you have been having this problem. I'm thinking about, some of the skills we've got, some of the expertise or technology in our team. I think we're probably going to be able to solve that problem. But let's figure out some more about that. Like, is this something that's actually an issue for you? Yeah, interesting. How much do you think that costs you every year? How much? So
what's the opportunity?
And I think that starting sooner rather than later means that you're able to have those conversations better, rather than, we've developed this product, do you like it?
Yes, like no, binary.
And so then you're doing none of that customer development, and you've left yourself in that position where it's like, okay, well, they've said no, now what do we do?
You're back to the drawing board. It's a big question. How did you leave it with Steve? You were on a peer level with him, co-creating, teaching.
I do have his email address.
There we go. When's he coming on the grounding? That's what I was going to ask.
When is he coming? Are you watching now, Steve? He signed my book.
There we go. I was going to ask. You said off there that you didn't get a picture of him, but you asked him.
Yeah, I carried it all the way up to London with me and got that signed. That was my main goal. I actually I mean, it was interesting as well because one of the things I realized was you put people on pedestals, right? And this is, I mean, he's an incredibly impressive person. And I thought I would go in and be very sort of intimidated or, oh, how do I prove myself to this
Yeah.
person? Or how do, and it wasn't like that really at all.
Yeah, but that was your mindset going into
Yeah,
it could have been like that
Yeah.
if you allowed it to happen.
Yeah. And I think because I was just more focused on, when I was asking questions, I was asking it from the point of view of the businesses I work with. So a lot of it was around like, how do I better serve the businesses I work with? Because he does entrepreneurial education, I do entrepreneurial education. A lot of, and of course that meant that in my head I was like, well, maybe there's like some ongoing working relationship here, which there, who knows, but
all it takes is that one conversation.
It's true. Yeah. But then also there was part of me that was like, is that even where I'm at? Is that something I want right now? Is that as I go into some of the new projects I'm working on, it could be that there's some really interesting conversations that come out of that, having built the relationship, that are more to just do with how do we better serve technical founders? What do we do now in this slightly new age where product market fit maybe doesn't mean the same thing anymore, or when things are evolving? So it's kind of set the groundwork for that. But equally going, that's not necessarily the output. I mean, it's that whole thing of sort of, it would be a vanity metric in some ways, right? Of, oh yeah, big name, that would sound good, that would look good. But actually, what's the tangible thing? Is there a real thing that could actually be helped by this? Yeah. And I think that's kind of where my brain is at right now.
I've got a funny story from last week talking about meeting people. Yeah. So I was at an event down in Everard's Farm, North Somerset, like an amazing nature retreat and dwellings, and they're going for hospitality redefined. So two serial founders, Tracy and Robbie Williams, not the Robbie Williams.
That Robbie Williams.
And yeah, they had their kind of like quarterly entrepreneurial meetup. They had a guest speaker. So Amelia Sordell, who's built a very big name on LinkedIn for personal branding, done £4 million in revenue over 5 years or so. And I kind of went in a bit curious. Like, I think what I've learned is you can never take anything you read online as verbatim. But actually, like, she was really impressive in terms of what she said. And like, one of the takeaways was, and it's kind of obvious, but it's not. It's like, it's not good enough to be the best. You have to be the best now. Because then you'll be in people's heads, you'll be referred, like you'll build that buzz, that reputation. If you think X, then it's associated with Y. And yeah, afterwards I was like, she's obviously well known in the industry. I was like, I probably should get a picture with her. Went to take out my phone, so Amelia, can we have a selfie? My phone died, and I was like, how embarrassing. I was like, and she was like, do you want me to take one of my phone? I was like, yeah, got on then. And yeah, I asked her to send it to me afterwards, and she did kindly. So you can assume a lot about people if you've read their profile online, and claiming big numbers and all that stuff. But actually, she was really genuine. And yeah, I think that moment of the selfie was actually quite funny.
Yeah, it's well, this is the thing, right? Well, funnily enough, when I was asking to get the book signed, he was there with somebody on his team, and he was like, and she was like, oh, let me take a photo of this. Like, so it's obviously a kind of interesting thing for them as well. I must say, you just made me think of something else too, which was one of the things that I've taken away from it, and I think maybe it's part of being energized and stepping up a little bit, and is that when I was observing his session, he did a session where he was giving feedback to the entrepreneurs, and I just thought the level of nuance, the level that he's holding them to. And for me, when I even coming back the next day and doing some entrepreneur in residence sessions, some of that gave me a lot more clarity and a lot more, oh, no, you just hold these businesses accountable, these founders accountable. That's what you're there to do, and set high expectations for them. And
challenge.
Yeah, exactly. Give them that challenge, which of course, I mean, I try to do that all the time, but I think it felt less encumbered in some ways. It sort of just felt like, no, this is the expectation. And we could turn around and say, well, they do it like that in Silicon Valley, but we don't really do it like that here. But it's the reality is you want to make your business a success.
Yeah.
We've got to keep moving forward. And yeah, like I said, the nuance by which he really was interrogating different aspects of what they do and getting straight to the point of it was really impressive. And
like you say, that level of knowledge and depth he's had and across sectors, industries, like
so much
he would
experience.
have seen all the stories, all the situations. Like, wow.
And honestly, it made me feel so lucky for all the work I've already done. And as you mentioned before, that idea of, oh no, you do have the insight, you do have the opinion, you do have exactly. And so it was really, it didn't make me feel undermined, it didn't make me feel less than, it made me feel like, well, how are you stepping up into this? How are you delivering what you deliver even better? And that, I think, is why I'm also feeling more energized now, because I'm not kind of sitting here getting energy drained by questioning some of that. I'm like, no, I've got knowledge, I've got experience. Like, let's.
But that's what great people do, don't they? They come away feeling energized and remotivated. Essentially, what you're saying is that you felt refreshed from that. And I think, you know, it might not be anything he said in particular, but it's how he made you feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like I said, none of that was really me. I was doing a lot of observation on these days, which I feel very grateful for being able to do that. So really conscious about the time. See, I may be refreshed, but it has been a long week. Yeah, it's about time for us to wrap up. But have you got any final thoughts?
I think just coming back to the topic of SaaS and agentic AI, like go out and have a play and an experiment. Like, you got to do it for yourself. There's no point reading loads and listening to loads of different people say things. You just got to do it for yourself. Get grounded. There we go. Do it. Thanks, everyone. Excellent.